All right, so welcome everybody to another episode of the Lest We Forget podcast, a historical podcast by Tenement Yarn Media. I'm your host, Davey. And on this episode, right, we're going to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. All right, this is going to be our second episode surrounding St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Our first episode was talking about probably the most famous politician to come out of the country, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, the episode about him. So if you want to hear more about him, he's now the opposition leader of the country. If you want, all of that, or him get banned, all of that things, you can go listen to that. You understand? Great episode. I'm going to link an episode we're going to link an episode for the website page from my website, tenementyarmedia.com. I don't know, right? Go check that out. I'm going to link that episode. So if you want more backstory on our first episode about St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you can listen to that. But for this episode, right? This episode is a very special episode because I found out about this event when I was working on the Grenadian episodes. Also a couple episodes I can go check out. You understand? We have 5 episodes telling you how the Grenadian Revolution started, why it happened. Beautiful, beautiful episodes. Some of the best things I've ever written. You understand? Like, absolutely amazing episodes. Yeah. So while I was like, was it after? I think it was after I finished writing episodes and I was writing the other batch of episodes surrounding like the PRG government, the People Revolutionary Government, right? That them episodes are gonna come out later soon. I came to find out about this, rebellion that occurred in St. Vincent and Grenadines. Same year. And it's kind of funny because, like, it's like things happen in the Caribbean, but then, like, one big thing kind of overshadow other things. You understand? So, like, you have, like, the Cuban Revolution happening in 1959. But then, there was a whole lot of uprising that happened in Martinique. But because the Cuban Revolution it took up so much space in the media, like, what happened in Martinique kind of got overshadowed. You see me, I'm trying to say, especially in, like, academia and research materials. In the same manner, Grenadian Revolution was such a big deal. You see me, I'm trying to say, that it kind of overshadowed what happened in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But, no matter, don't know. This is why we're here. You see me, I'm trying to say? So we're going to tell you what's going on, really. And basically, just as a summary is that, like, St. Vincent and the Grenadines is an archipelago in its own right. And resident of the Grenadines, right, the other, islands that make up St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they had their concerns. You see me, I'm trying to say, they had their concerns in the wake of St. Vincent getting independence in October 1979. And it's like, the government really moved too swift to address it. And a group of people on one of those Grenadian islands, Union Island, them say, yo, fix up. You understand? Them say, fix up. Is it? And them address it in the way that them want to address it. Is it? So, we're going to tell you the whole story about that and all of that. So, yeah, we could start. All right, so before we begin, I just want to give a bit of backstory on St. Vincent and the Grenadines because I've seen this played out, especially in recent years, where persons or West Indians who are not from, the Lesser Antilles, or not from the Eastern Bloc of the Caribbean, get confused when it comes to the history around some of the countries there, especially St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Grenada. Similar names, same archipelago, but different. Why are they 2 different nations? Like, I saw this play out, and I saw this play out. It was very embarrassing in the way that play out. Because I'm a firm believer that if you don't know nothing, put some effort for learn. You see what I'm trying to say? No, that's not what happened. But that's what Tenement Yarn Media is for. That's what Let's See Forget is for. So, I'm just going to take this opportunity to just give a brief history, you understand, before going on to the whole 1979 uprising, right? So, yeah. So, we're going to start, like we start with everything in the beginning of the Caribbean, the Amerindians, right? So, they were the first inhabitants of the Grenadines, and specifically the Caribs, right? They were the specific group of Amerindians in the Grenadines. However, historical evidence shows that the region's indigenous people did not spend a lot of time on the smaller islands of the Grenadian archipelago. And according to the geographer, Dr. John Edward Adams, this is what he said.
Based on the fragmentary data, it appears that the Grenadines did not support a significant Aboriginal population, and the islands were mere appendages to more important Carib settlements in Grenada and St. Vincent. The absence of surface water and the springs in the Grenadines may have been the key factor in restricting Caribbean occupation of Union Island and the other Grenadines.
Still, the presence of indigenous West Indians were effectively disrupted by European colonization of the region. We know this, right? Like everything. The Europeans' main interest in the Grenadian islands were the cultivation of cash crops, such as tobacco, cotton, coffee, and sugarcane, which were planted, and timber, which was cut and packaged for export to neighboring island of Martinique. Then during this period in the 17th century, there was an increase of political tension in the area where both France and Britain would lay claim to St. Lucia, Dominica, and St. Vincent. But Grenada and the Grenadines were undisputed French colonies. Like, everybody knows that them belonged to the French. Still, in 1648, M. du Parquet, who oversaw Martinique, purchased Grenada and the Grenadines, where supervisory powers were given to Lieutenant General of the King of France. And as such, by 1650, a colony was established in Grenada. I know all of this confusing. It's going to make sense. Right? However, almost a century later, the political tension between the French and the British would reach fever pitch. It would be the Treaty of Paris. This is the Treaty of Paris in 1763. I know enough Treaty of Paris out there. We are talking about the 1763 Treaty of Paris, right? That's the one that ended this conflict that was happening in the Caribbean between the French and the British, right? And out of this treaty would come Britain taking possession of Dominica, St. Vincent, Grenada, the Grenadines, and Tobago. We need to do an episode on Tobago, specifically because for them history is very wild and contentious. Now, these islands were collectively called the New West India Colonies, and on March 26, 1764, they were being surveyed by royal proclamation. Cool? But also within this treaty, what came out of this treaty was two Carib wars, which was fought between the Caribs and the British on the island of St. Vincent. And we did get an email last year from a Vincent. I think he's a film major. I don't remember your name if you're listening. But I remember that you're a film major at UWI. I think your name starts with A, I believe. But you did email us about doing an episode on the Carib Wars and the Garifuna people. I'm working on it. There's a lot of backstory there's a lot of backward that I have to do specifically because not a lot I know about the Garifuna people when it comes to the Eastern Caribbean. The most I know is Belize. Is me because I know a bit of history and there. Plus them have them like them Garifuna there, and it's a popular thing that I have in the front of my brain. But may I work on it? That's not for you who send the email. May I work on it? I'm getting there. But for persons who have no idea what I'm talking about, just a brief, summary of the Carib Wars. Specific to these two wars were the Garifuna people whose main purpose was to preserve their freedom on the island. And leaders such as Turuya, I know I butchered the name there, Bigot, and Chatoya led organized resistance against the Europeans. However, they were outarmed by the British, and by the late 1700s, many would flee to the other areas in the Americas, mostly Central America, which is why I said, my knowledge of the Garifuna people is largely Belize. But may I work on it. I can work on the Carib Wars and St. Vincent. It'll come. Almost say something will come. 2 years. But it'll come. But despite the peace agreement between European powers, political flare-ups were still happening between Britain and France in the area. The treaty never did that fix everything, you see? And as such, over the next few decades, the Grenadines would be raided by pirates loyal to the French, where they burn houses, crops, and kidnap enslaved black people. Black people gonna be involved in all of this. You understand? Because imagine You're enslaved already now. You are a slave, right? And two white powers are fight and involve you. Nothing that change. Nothing that change at all. And with this, persons are part of the British regime cited security concerns and more efforts needed in the smaller islands being able to maintain themselves, especially in times of warlike tensions, right? And it is out of this, with this being the main concern, in 1791, Britain would partition the Grenadines into two separate administrative units. So with this, the southern islands of the Grenadines, like Carriacou and Petite Martinique, was placed under the administrative control of Grenada, while the northern islands, that is Mayotte, Canaan, Mustique, Biquia, me know me a butcher it, go easy with me, and Union Island, those remain with St. Vincent, right? And this is how it has remained to this day. So that's where we now have St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we have Grenada. So I hope the next time the internet wars happen, with people not knowing these are two different countries, St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Grenada, this provides some answers, right? No, go back to the rebellion. Right? No, so around the time that the Grenadines got partitioned, the enslaved population of Union Island hovered around 500, right? By 1838, when emancipation took place in the British West Indies, the black population was more or so the same, where by 1871, the total population of Union Island was 581. Now, just to be clear, moving forward, Union Island is going to be the focus of what I'm talking about, right? Again, Uprising took place there specifically. Now, around this time, one of the industries that expanded was agriculture, where many residents took place in a sharecropping model that emerged after emancipation, right? And in this model, tenants work on colonized estate lands for a percentage of the crops reaped. Now, if you want to know more about a lot of the land issues that was taking place after emancipation in the British West Indies, you can check out our podcast episode, The Fight to Own Land in Jamaica. I know it's on Jamaica focus, but we did go into a bit of issues surrounding land rights in the wider Caribbean, specifically to Black West Indians in the aftermath of emancipation. So we're going to link that on the page. Let's go link on the page. Still, these crops would be exported to other areas in the Eastern Caribbean. Cotton fiber and seed, as well as poultry, was sent to St. Vincent, and pigeon peas to Grenada and Barbados. Wood was also sent to Barbados, where sheep and goats were exported to Trinidad. And around this time, turtle fishing was also an industry many black residents of Union Island took part in. Now, according to Dr. John Edwards Adams, again, we're going to draw him, this is what he had to say.
Turtle fishing is the oldest continuous economic activity in Union Island. The Blue Books and Annual Trade Report of St. Vincent record a yearly export of live turtles and turtle shells from the Grenadines to Trinidad, Barbados, and the United Kingdom throughout the 19th century.
And the turtle fishing industry would continue throughout the 1900s, right? Another marine industry that was prominent after emancipation was whaling. And humpback whales would be hunted in and around Union Island, where the oil was collected, cooled, and shipped to St. Vincent to be sent to the UK. The meat was then sold to locals, where whale was a major cuisine of residents. But by the 1920s, when the island's population was now in the 1100s thereabout, the whaling industry was stalled due to overfishing of whales and a lack of demand for whale oil. Now, this issue, you understand, the issue around whaling would be one of the first economic restriction of the island in the 20th century that drove residents' frustration even further. Cool? Now, by the mid-20th century, residents of the country began to feel an economic sting, which led to the St. Vincent labor riots of 1935. I work on an episode about that. I tell you to talk about this. I work on an episode. It'll come. Understand? As I said before, when it comes to the labor riots in the Anglophone Caribbean, I want to do all of them at the same time. You understand? Jamaica, Trinidad, St. Vincent, Belize, Barbados. I want to go through all of them one time. So, I just want to finish up. I finish couple of the countries. I just need to finish the rest. And I drop all of them one time. So, but them there come. Soon talk to that, right? Yet, the strain that was happening on St. Vincent wasn't confined to them alone. By the 1950s, a fertilizer supply was occurring on Union Island, and it really affected cotton farms where many crops were destroyed by parasites as well as an outbreak of bollworm infestation. The decade also saw a series of drought conditions, and one of the examples that were found of this was in 1958. The island experienced a severe drought which caused many water holes to dry up and many cattle dying off due to lack of water and grass. You see, someone said the people in Union Island, they that got through it, then they that got through it. Like, the whole St. Vincent and the Grenadines black, they that got through it, but Union Island, them that get lick. You understand? And by 1960s, the census showed that only 69% of persons on Union Islands, this specifically to the male labor force, was working. All the data that we could find at the time was specific to males. They never tell about the woman, them, you know it. You know them still. You know them still. So, yeah. Now, constrained due to these events, residents of Union Island would turn to the sea, where conch fishing would soon become an important economic activity in the 1950s. Drawback again for John Edward Adams in his paper, Conch Fishing Industry of Union Island, West Indies, where he stated, and I quote, in 1966, an estimated 200,000 pounds of conch meat was sold in Grenada and Trinidad, valued at $30,000, end quote. That's a USD, by the way. Now, with the conch industry, I get it look a boom. You see me, I try to say. By the 1970s, nearly the entire yield of conch was sold to the proprietor of the Clinton Yacht Club to support, Union Island tourist industry. You understand? I look a tourism thing a go on. You see me, I try to say that it a go on. You understand? And out of this boom, and I just say boom. You understand? Out of like the emerging industry that was happening, snapper, red hind and grouper fishes were sold to the property. You understand? And specific to the tourism industry, right? Another thing that came out of this was that in the early 1970s, we also saw men of the island gain work and foreign owned. I want to know this, You understand? The tourism industry was largely foreign owned back. It was backed by foreign owned bulk carriers, and men were also working at the Palm Island Resort. And the Palm Island Resort was established to support, the tourism industry, which are getting a major boost to the construction of, like, an airport strip. You see me, Jefferson? So, like, things that happen, things were happening. You understand? Still, despite these emerging industries, the 1970s saw underemployment, unemployment, and underdevelopment of the island becoming a major issue. You understand? Not only on Union Island even, but throughout the Grenadian dependent islands. And for this, I'm going to draw for a book called Crisis in the Caribbean, which, but I just want to say, this book was like, I got a physical copy of the book, right? I just want you all to know, if you want a copy of this book, it's got, listen, you feel fight tooth and nail. And what really upset me the most about getting this book, the book cost like $2, like $2. But trying to get the book was a problem, because this was like one of the only resources that like documented the rebellion that you could find. Like, oh my God. I can't. And book are coming from UK, not even the Caribbean, the book base. UK. Either way, let us move on. So, in the book, Crisis in the Caribbean, the sociologist Philip Nanton wrote the following.
In recent years, the islands have been forced to depend on the mainland for freshwater supplies. Of the 7 permanently inhabited islands, Mairo and Canouan are without electricity. No islands contain more than an outline of a road system. Education standards on most of the islands remain low, and emigration is accepted as a way of life. Neglect is shown by the lease of sale of a number of islands to foreign private companies at almost giveaway rates in order to develop tourism.
Then, on April 13, 1979, the La Soufrière volcano erupted, causing thousands of persons to be displaced and about USD 100 million in damages. But the eruption happened in the middle of the nation's independence campaign, and like hope shining through despair, on October 27, 1979, they won independence from Britain, thus becoming St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So everybody merged together, right? Soon after, the country would host their first post-independence election on December the 5th. Four political parties would contest it. The St. Vincent Labour Party, SLVP, the New Democratic Party, NDP, the People's Political Party, PPP, and the Left Alliance of the United People's Movement, which comprised the AWREE, the People's Democratic Party, PDM, and the Yolu United Liberation Movement, Yoliomo. No, Sino, there's a bit on Yoliomo. They have a very interesting history with the government during this period, as documented in their newspaper Freedom. Some of their members faced police raids on their homes, while their leaders got arrested and faced hostility in political circles, especially with SLVP. In fact, by 1979, right, Uliamo was led by a then young academic named Dr. Ralph Gonzalez, you understand, who was facing hostility throughout the Eastern Caribbean at this time. But ironically, as history would have it, he went on to become one of the longest serving head of governments in Caribbean history. Now, if you want to learn more about Dr. Ralph Gonzalez and his history and everything that was happening to him around this time, you can check out the other Lest We Forget episode, The Censorship Years of Comrade Ralph. Go listen to that. Now, in the wake of the election, SLVP got the majority vote, winning 53.6% of the votes. And as such, their leader, Milton Cotto, who was also premier from 1974 to 1979, became prime minister. And now, the optics was that out of this ashes of the volcanic eruption, a new era of St. Vincent and the Grenadines would bloom. However, in this jubilation of independence and the election, residents of Union Island still had their concerns of unemployment, underdevelopment, and underdevelopment, right? And they wanted to know how these concerns would fit into this new period of the country's history. But it's key to remember, right, that this is the year of 1979. And the other partition nation in the archipelago, that is Grenada, right? They just had the first successful revolution in the English-speaking Caribbean. And as such, a group of men on Union Island would seek inspiration from that event to address their grievances. And so it goes, on December 7, 1979, just 2 days after St. Vincent and the Grenadines election, an uprising took place on Union Island. At the center of the event was the bombing of the Ashton police station. According to persons involved, the bombing was to scare the police, and they were scared. For even though no police was hurt, reports was that they all flee. Then the group obtained a PA system from a nearby church, upon which they informed the entire island of the uprising. Then they took control of several government buildings and facilities. Now, by most reports that we could find, the uprising was led by a man named Lennox Bumbo Charles. And Charles had lived abroad for a number of years before returning to Union Island. Now, on the island, he helped produce the island's first local newspaper and got involved in a few small-scale projects, including plans for a farming scheme. But by 1978, Charles was a part of Union Island's delegation in Bekia. Again, I know me butcher them name, just with me, to speak on issues affecting the Grenadines. And Union Island issues, the concerns that were raised include overfishing of its waters, drug smuggling, and foreign exploitation. A year later, these issues were clearly not addressed, and as stated above, was a driving force of the revolt. Now, according to Bumba, in a 2019 article published in the newspaper, the Vincentian, the uprising was targeted at, and I quote here, the government structure which extracted everything and gave back nothing tangible to the people of southern Grenadines, end quote. However, we should say that Bumba over the years have stated that he was not the mastermind behind the revolt. According to him, he was just a foot soldier, and the real leaders of the uprising was the island's senior citizens who were motivated after reportedly hearing the then Prime Minister Milton Carter said, and I quote here, "Unionites will have to eat grass," end quote. Still, regardless of who was in charge, it became abundantly clear that the uprising lacked organization, equipment, and support. We can draw for Trinidad 1990, but we're gonna hold it. So every time I talk about that situation, I'm still mind blown. Right? So when I say that them specifically lack organization, equipment, and support, I'm gonna give you an example, right? After the PA announcement, right, a group of persons journeyed to Palm Island to let persons know about the uprising. But when they approached the island, they were fired upon by John Cadwell, who had leased the island in 1966 for 99 years, whereby now Palm Island was, again, turned into a resort. The group then turned to Caracou, largely in search of weaponry. Again, not even that them have, But they were met with resistance and told to leave. Right? Now, in the days that followed, the Mito government declared a state of emergency and a curfew from dusk till dawn was implemented. The government then sent a battalion of police from St. Vincent to the Union Island. The operation was led by Inspector Rodford Cox, who was also a Unionite. At the time, St. Vincent and the Grenadines did not have an army and thus was supported by Bajan soldiers. But according to the attorney at law, Steve Stewart, this was not a popular move in Barbados. As he wrote in an article for the newspaper, the Vincentian, in 2019,
Mito called on the United States, Britain, and the region to send troops to assist. Only Prime Minister Tom Adams of Barbados responded by sending Bajan soldiers to Vinci soil, which provided serious debates in the Barbadian Parliament. The view was that the Union Island uprising was an internal matter of state and ought not to be subjected to foreign interference by other countries.
Nevertheless, the troop of law enforcement would use the Palm Island as a base where around 40 persons involved in the uprising was arrested and the revolt eventually put down. The operation would result in the death of one person and another person, Lyndon Stewart, went missing at sea. Then for Bumba, he and a group of persons would flee to Grenada but was eventually detained by the nation authorities and returned to St. Vincent to face criminal charges. And that's the revolt. Now, in the aftermath of the revolt, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines would strengthen the police force. And in August 1981, when rumors of an attempted coup started making the rounds, there was discussion of a citizens' militia. Then the state of emergency, which was declared on Union Island in December 1979, lasted for several months, where it eventually ended in June 1980. As for those who were arrested during the operation, many were released the following year without charge. According to Stewart, and I'm quoting here, it was 3 torturous weeks of being beaten, drenched regularly with cold water, and made to lie on the cold floor with little sleeping material and little to eat. End quote. For those who took part in the uprising, they were branded in international press as members of a Rastafarian cult. So, this Rastafarian cult, I'm going to tell you where it comes from. A December 9, 1979 New York Times article branded them a Rastafarian cult. That was one of the sources that I find. While a March 10, 1981 article published in the United Press International called them, and I quote here, Rastafarian Black Power cultists. Now, in the end of what would become the longest trial in St. Vincent and Grenadines' history up to this point, a number of persons were sent to trial. This includes Bumba and his reported number 2, Camilo Adams. Bumba received the longest prison sentence of everyone and eventually, with Junior Spirit Cuttle, began a prison literacy program while incarcerated. Both men then went on to become the first persons to gain GCE O-level subjects while serving prison sentences. Still, today, the uprising is largely seen as an important day on Union Island. On December 8, 2019, at a public ceremony observing the 40th anniversary of the uprising, many persons spoke on their experience of the event and the circumstances that led to it. The Vincentian covered the event and mentioned that one resident, Maria McKee, called for December 7 to be designated Lyndon Stewart Memorial Day. Bumba and Camille, as well as Chris Adams and Peter Regis, was also at the above event where they spoke on their experiences taking part in the uprising. The Vincentian newspaper also mentioned that Bumba is largely seen through a heroic lens on Union Island. And this is what they stated.
Bumba Charles remains a heralded figure in Union Island. His legacy is a positive one, he being revered for starting the first steel orchestra in Union Island, introducing structured basketball to the youth of the island, producing the first newspaper for Union, albeit an underground one.
Now, today, the state of the island is not the same as it was in the 1970s, with many infrastructure and employment improvements. Still, some of the grievances of the citizens of Union Island and the rest of the Southern Grenadines have largely not went away. At the 40th commemoration of the uprising, which I spoke about earlier, one Union Island citizen, Roseman Adams, stated that the last stanza of the country's national anthem needs to be replaced, specifically the phrase, and I quote, "Our little sister islands," end quote. Then, in 2024, Hurricane Beryl would hit the Southern Grenadines, causing widespread damages. According to a World Bank report, it was reported US $230.6 million in damages, roughly 22% of the country's gross domestic product, where Union Island was the worst hit area, suffering an estimated US $93.9 million in damages, roughly 41% of the total damages. Almost half of the population was displaced to St. Vincent, and almost a year later, the island is still recovering. However, if there's anything we can take away from this episode, if anything history has shown us, is that the citizens of Union Island and the rest of the Grenadines, the rest of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, really, will always find a way to bounce back from adversity.
And with that, we call an end to today's episode. To view the sources used in this episode and or recommendations to learn more about the topic, visit our website at tenementyardmedia.com. A transcript of this episode will be available 5 days after it has been posted to podcast outlets. And remember, this is a conversation we really want to hear from you. Follow our social media pages at tenementyard_ on both Instagram and Twitter to view additional postings on this episode and updates on other content created by Tenement Yard Media. We're open to conversation about this and other episodes and really all happenings around Caribbean history and culture. Just a quick note before we leave, we're over on Patreon at patreon.com/tenementyardmedia if you would like to support the show with a monthly donation of as little as $1. You can also make a donation of your choice at tenementyardmedia.com. Until next time, this has been Lest We Forget, a historical podcast from Tenement Yard Media. What good?